Hi everybody, my name is Angie. Welcome to my channel. So I am going to be working on today a quilt. I have a little baby quilt that I have planned. I have a new nephew who is scheduled to make an appearance in T-minus 10 days from today. This will not be the day that I am filming or the day that I post this, but so I need to get cracking. I've had this fabric for a couple months now and I really need to get this quilt done. They live a few states away from me, so I am planning on going the week after, so I do have a little bit more time. But I need to get cracking on that. This is, I'll leave measurements of the fabric that I am using down below, but this is going to be like the most basic baby quilt that is still pieced together in a quilt, you know, not just one big sheet or anything like that. So it's going to be a pretty basic quilt, but great for a beginner quilt. You could kind of use this one. I'm making it like kind of crib size, but you could use it as like a lap quilt or something like that. It is, I have made this quilt before and, or similar quilt, and I was able to get it done in I think one day. So this, if you have an entire day that you can designate to sewing, then this could potentially be a one-day project. I do not have a single day that I can set aside to get all this done. So you will see me changing clothes. I will be doing a little bit here, a little bit there, but I'll go ahead and film along the way and show you how I am making this baby quilt. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so to start out with, you are going to need 5 different prints of fabric, and you're going to get a ½ yard of each. You will have a little bit left over of this, so just keep that in mind. And then you're also going to need some backing fabric. So I got 2 yards of this to use as the backing, and this is also going to be my binding. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this into 2½ inch strips for binding as well. All right, so we're going to be cutting these into 6½ inch squares. So, and we're going to need a total of 48 squares. So that's going to give us 6 inch squares, 6 across by 8 down. So it'll give us a total of, I believe, 36 inches by 48 inches. So I have all of my pieces here, and I lined them up as best as I could along the selvage edge and along the cut edge down here. And I'm going to go ahead and use my rotary cutter and just make sure that I have all of the selvages in here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the selvages off. Yeah. All right, so I have a nice straight line over here, and then I'm going to go ahead and take that and cut the other end. I'm going to shift this around. So I have a nice flat edge here that I'm going to line up my bottom, one of the lines on my ruler, and line that up. And I'll shift it over as far as I can so that I'm not cutting too much. Make sure I got everything, and we'll go ahead and just cut to get us a nice square between here and the side. So that gives us a nice square edge that we can use to start our measuring. All right, so there's 2 different ways that you can go about cutting these. And I'm right-handed, so I'm gonna flip this around. So one way that you can do is, I like to have the cut edge over on the left-hand side if I'm right-handed. And I have 2 different rulers that I'm working with here. So this is a 6 inch ruler, 6 inches wide, which is not quite as big as I would need. So I'm going to take another ruler here and align that at the ½ inch mark along the edge here, and then hold that in place nice and sturdy, and then butt this ruler up to it. And now I can see that this is my 6 inch ruler here. So this is 6 inches and this is a ½ inch. So now this is, if I cut on this line, that's 6½ inches to give me my first strip for the blocks. If you don't have two rulers, you can use your cutting mat. I would double check and make sure that your cutting mat is accurate. Sometimes it can get warped. So I check mine periodically and mine is okay. So you can use that as well. But for now, this is the way that I have it set here is decent. And then I just kind of slide it down and just make sure that it is in fact coming across at that 1/2 inch mark the whole way. So that is good. I'm gonna go ahead and cut. So I have all of those pieces all lined up. So that gives me 6-inch strips in all of my fabric. Now I'm gonna go ahead and set that aside and do one more strip. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing to each of these strips, aligning it along the 1/2 inch mark and then cutting it to 6.5 inches. So basically how it's gonna work out is out of 3 of the prints, if you're using all 5 prints, out of 3 of the prints, you're gonna need 10 squares, and out of 2 of the prints, you're going to need 9 squares. So I'm gonna go ahead and this first chunk here, this first strip, I'm gonna go ahead and just cut. I can get 3 squares out of this. And then the other one, I'm gonna break apart so that I don't cut pieces that I don't need. All right, so I'm gonna align the 1/2 inch. All right, so I have these 2 that I'm gonna go ahead and do 9 squares out of. So flip this back around. All right, so I already have 6 squares of each up here, so I only need 3 more. So I'm gonna go ahead and we'll cut one more 6.5 like this, which would give us 2 of each because they're doubled up. So that gives me 8 of each of those. And then, like I said, I don't want to cut more than what I need to right now, so I can save this fabric for something else. So I'm gonna go ahead and unfold this so that I'm not cutting an extra square of each. I'm just gonna unfold it and align these 2 pieces. So those are all lined up. So now they're not doubled up, so I'm only cutting 1 of each. So that will get me the 9. All right, so those squares are done. I can set this extra off to the side. And we'll go ahead and cut these ones now. And these squares, I need 10 of each, which means I need 4 more. So I can go ahead and cut 2. Kind of got misaligned as I was tossing them around. Okay. So I'll make 2 more cuts and then we are done. All right, so you should be left with a stack of 48 squares, and we can go ahead and start laying it all out and start putting our top together. So now I have all of my squares cut out, so I'm gonna go ahead and lay these out. Now, I don't have space in my sewing room or anywhere for that matter for like a design wall, so my pro tip way around that is I have a tablecloth, and it's one that has like the felt fuzzy backing to it. And what we do is lay this out. And because it has that fuzzy backing to it, and this is the back side, so this is the front of it. I got it on clearance for like $1 or something at the end of the season. But because it has that fuzzy backing, it's going to go ahead and cling to this. And I can go ahead and lay it all out. And then, you know, when I need to put it away, when I need the floor space, but I'm not quite done, you know, with my quilt top yet, I just roll it up inside of it, fold it up and set it off to the side, and it's out of my way. So that's what we're doing. You're gonna take the prints that you have the 10 pieces of. So remember there's 3 of the colors that we have 10 pieces of and 2 of them that we have 9 pieces of, or 9 squares. So we're gonna take the 3 that we have the 10 squares of and line those up first, and then the 2 that we have the 9 squares of, those go last. So I'm gonna go ahead and arrange it. Let's see, like this. So these are the 3 that I have 10 squares of, and then we'll do squares that I have 9 of after that. And then we need a 6th. So that'll be that starting one again. And then the, we're gonna go and just do diagonals. So they're gonna be kind of going top right down to bottom left. So I'm just gonna take this next square here. So I'm gonna take the one diagonal up from the start. So this one here, I'm gonna make that the first one over here. And then this next one here, we'll make that, and then just keep going along until we have them all laid out. And if you have ones that are directional print, you know, if you want them all facing the same way, like these ones have bears and these ones have animals, you know, I want those all making sure that they're facing upright. But if you don't care about that, that's fine too. And then whatever you used for the first block over here, that's what you're going to use for the last block over here too. So if you ever, you know, can't figure out which one goes next, then, you know, because it doesn't have the diagonal over here that you're following, you just go with whatever you used for the first one. And then we'll just keep working our way down until all of our squares are used. That is all the time that I had to do this today. So I'm going to go ahead and just roll this on up, set it aside, and I'll come back to it tomorrow. Okay, I am back for day 3 of sewing up the baby quilt. So I have just a little bit of time tonight, so I'm gonna go ahead and see what I can get done. So I have my little tablecloth thing here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and roll it back out. And you can see everything stays together. It is all exactly where I left it, and I was able to roll it up and move it out of the way and use the space in here as I needed to. Hi, Penny. No, you can't get on this. What I like to do is take, we'll start from this side, but I'm just gonna go ahead and take this last piece over here and flip it over onto the second to last row. So I'm working my way up like this. I am taking the last row, taking that square and flipping it over so that it's right sides together with the second to last row. And that way I know I'm gonna go ahead and stitch on this line right here, and then when I open it up, I can just flip it right back over and it'll all be in its place. And then I'm gonna go ahead and take these, and I'm gonna just start setting them on top of each other like this. And then I have a nice little stack like this that I can take over to my sewing machine, and I know that I am going to stitch on this side over here. So I'm going to take these over to my sewing machine and chain stitch those together. All right, so I have my, you don't necessarily need coordinating thread in this because these threads aren't going to show, but I like to have just a neutral thread in here, so I just have like a gray silver. because that's what I was using before, honestly. And I have my stitch length set to a 2, so I'm going to have a nice small stitch length because this is pretty thin quilt cotton. And then I'm just going to go ahead and take this first piece here, and you can pin it if you're more comfortable doing that, but I am just going to go ahead and start sewing and following along that 1/4 inch mark. Okay, and then once I'm done with that one, I'm going to go ahead and just move straight on to the next one without cutting my threads. I'm just going to go ahead and move right on to the next one. Alright, so I have my pile that I have all chained together, and now I can go ahead and trim those threads. And I'm just going to go ahead and set them right back in order with this my stitch line on the right hand side again, so they don't get all flipped around, and set them right back on top of each other. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and take it over to my iron and press the seams. All right, so now we have our stack of squares that we need to go ahead and press the seams. So what we're going to do is this first stack here, or this first square, we're just going to go ahead and slide that over to the side with the seam over on this side. And then I'm going to take my iron and just press the seam. And that sets the seam so that when I flip it over, it automatically wants to flip over right at the crease of that seam there. And then we'll give that a press. And then we can set that one aside. And then this next one, what we need to do is we're actually going to flip it over because we need these two seams to go in opposite directions so that we can nest them together. So we're going to flip this one around so that the seam is over on this side now. We're going to go ahead and press. Yeah. And then press that. So that the seam for this one is going this way. And this seam is going this way, so that when we set them on top of each other, when we ultimately have to stitch them together, our seams are going to go, it's hard to tell with this background, but our seams are going in opposite directions. This top one is going this way, and this bottom one is going that way. And it helps those corners come together really nice because we can butt the two corners up to each other. So that's why we need one going one way and one going the other. So you're just going to go ahead and take your squares and alternate them. Every other square, we're going to go one to the right, one to the left. All right, so now we have our top piece here is now, you can kind of figure out which way it needs to go. I had these all, you know, making sure that they were staying upright the entire time. And this right-handed piece here matches my top corner over here. So I know that this one goes here. And I can just set these out back where they came from. All right, and then we'll just go ahead and move on to the next row, doing the same thing as we did for this one. And then if you got time for it, you can go ahead and do the next row at the same time. Just make sure to keep it straight, which row is which. All right, so I'm now moving on to sewing up the next ones. So I have my far left columns here and then the middle ones here. So I'm gonna set these ones over to the side and just kind of do it since I was going right to left. We'll just continue with that. So then we'll just go ahead and pick up that first one and again, line up the edges and sew at 1/4 inch. Now we have this column here, this column here, and this column here all sewed together. So now what I'm going to do is take, I'm going to take the middle row and set it on top of the left side, or the left column. So just like we did the first time, flipping one piece on top of each other, but now we're just taking two pieces that are already stitched together and setting them on top of two pieces that are stitched together. Okay, and now we can go ahead and take this stack over to the sewing machine and do the same thing that we did before, stitching along this side, and then we're going to press those seams open in alternating directions. All right, so I got my stack here. So I'm going to take the two pieces on top of the two pieces, and I'm going to align the edges over on the far right side, and just go ahead and stitch them together just like I did when they were the individual squares. All right, so now we have this whole piece together. So now we're gonna go ahead and take this far right section all the way over here, and again, do the same thing, flip that one over onto the 4-piece section. All right, and again, I got my rows here, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this first one. So on the bottom, we have the 4-piece, and then on top of it we got the 2-piece. So it's looking a little funky right now, but we'll just do the same we've been doing. Align those two right edges and stitch it a 1/4 inch. Once you start getting longer tails like this, it can start pulling at your machine, or when you're at the machine stitching it a little bit. So sometimes it can kind of look like this hand is like pulling or, you know, pushing it through, but it's really just kind of trying to hold it in place so that the fabric isn't being pulled down. All right, now ironing these ones or pressing these ones open can get a little tricky because you're dealing with such a longer strip, but basically we're just doing the same thing again, alternating. Take this one and flip it over. I think I'm gonna go and set these down somewhere else so that I can have more room on my ironing board. I've done sewing up all of the strips, so we have all of these all the way down, completely done. So now we need to go ahead and start clipping or pinning these two together and sewing the rows together. So that is the time that we bust out our pins. And that will help us. I mean, you can do this without pins. This part of it is where I like to start with the pins, because it helps get some nicer points and corners on my little intersections here. So that's what we're gonna go ahead and get started. What we're gonna do is take, working on the bottom pieces now, but I'm gonna take one of the rows here, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and flip it down onto the other piece. And then I'm gonna take my pins and just put those two seams together here, nest them up, and I'm gonna put a pin right in that intersection. So here's a close-up of what we're doing. So we have one of the seams going to the right and one of the seams going to the left, and we're gonna go ahead and take them, and the fold of that seam, they just kind of butt up against each other, and we'll go ahead and just right in that intersection there, pop a pin in it. And I'm gonna go ahead and do that on all of the intersections there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure my two starting pieces align. Then we'll just start right at that 1/4 inch and just sew right on along. Take your pins out as you go. And then I just like to make sure as I go along, like, yes, the intersections are aligned, but sometimes things can shift a little bit, like this, the bottom can start pulling this way. So I just like to look under and just make sure that the edges are aligned all the way to the next pin. And then I'm using this hand to just kind of hold it in place underneath so that the fabric doesn't shift back. Okay, and then this seam here is not going to be intersecting with any other seam. So we can go ahead and press it whatever direction you want to do, just the whole way across, press it one way. All right, and then we go ahead and lay it back out, and you can see, because we pinned it right at the intersection there, we have some nice corners that line up very nicely together. All right, so not all of my intersections are going to be that nice. There's always inevitably one that gets shifted or something happens where it doesn't line up nicely, but that's what happens with homemade items, you know. This is not something that's mass produced by machines. There is human error involved, and that's okay. It's not going to be perfect. Those little tiny, you know, not perfect intersections are what makes this quilt unique and special, because that's how people know that it is a handmade item that you made yourself. You didn't go and buy in the store, again, like something that's mass produced. So I don't worry about little things like that. There's going to be little pieces that don't line up, and that's fine. We just move on. So I'm going to go ahead and get working on the rest of this, and just kind of do a couple more chunks as I go, just same as what I did on the last one. Okay, so now we have these two and these two all sewn together here. So these two rows, these two rows. So now we need to go ahead and put those together. So now I'm gonna go ahead and take this top two pieces and put them over the next two. And just like we did last time, intersecting those seams to nest the seams and putting a pin in there and doing that all the way across. And then we'll do the same for the bottom sections too. So then we'll be left with just two big sections of 4 rows and 4 rows. All right, so now you can see we have 2 separate pieces. We've got 4 squares or 4 rows all together, and then another 4 rows all together. So now we're gonna do this one last time. Flip this down over top of this piece. align the seams here, pin, sew, and press. All right, our quilt top is done. Now is the time to take one last good look and make sure that, you know, if any of your fabrics have a directional print that you want all facing the same way, to make sure one last time that they are all facing the same way, that the diagonals or whatever design you're going for, that it is all looking exactly like you want it, because once we get into this next step, it's going to be immensely harder to fix any mistakes than it is right now. So go ahead and just take a look, double check one last time, and then we can go ahead and get on to basting our quilt top onto the batting and the back.